And we are recording. We're live. Hi, everybody, and I'm sure some more folks will filter in as we get going. Welcome to another Ask Us Anything session. And again, this is an opportunity for you to ask us anything you'd like about writing and submitting and marketing and just being a writer in general. If you have really super specific stuff that can only apply to you, we may have to save that. So try to make, if you can, your question in a way that everybody can learn something from it. Mm-hmm. But we'll do our best on everything that comes our way. Mm-hmm. And we will have the recording of this up tomorrow. And we'll be doing these every month as best we can. Yep. So just a little bit of business to take care of. I know a lot of you are curious about what's coming up in our world and in Children's Book Insider world. So we want to just give you a couple of quick things. We have some new blueprints coming up. I know you're already familiar with Picture Book Blueprint and Chapter Book Blueprint. We have Self-Publishing Blueprint coming up at the end of March. Teresa Funk is working on that, and I met with her yesterday, and it looks absolutely incredible. A little bit down the road in the fall, is it, Laura? Young adult, middle grade?
We're shooting for end of June.
End of June, wow.
Middle grade.
That would be young adult.
As well. Middle grade, young adult. Yeah, it's going to be combined into one blueprint, covering both those age groups. And Alice Kuipers is going to be the main instructor for that, though I will be doing some of it as well.
We'll have, Laura will tell you a little bit about the Easy Reader add-on that she's creating right now. Mm-hmm. Also coming up, we have a free webinar, tentatively scheduled for the 28th of this month, which is all about how to create illustrations or get illustrations for your manuscript if you are not an illustrator and you can't afford to pay a professional illustrator. That's a topic that comes up all the time. We have a gentleman who will be coming in who's an expert on that, and he's actually going to show you live how to do that. A bunch of other things, interesting things coming up. We have a magazine writing blueprint that's in the works. Mm-hmm. So lots and lots of stuff, but it's all, I know that you guys love the blueprint concept, and so we're just going to fill out the blueprints as much as we can. Yes, Renee, I said right now, tentatively, it's the 28th for the illustration webinar, but check email and I'll have the details on that. And that will be a free webinar. And it's one of those deals where he'll give a really great presentation, and then you can purchase his course at the end if you're interested. Laura, why don't you talk a little bit about the Easy Reader add-on that's coming up? Yes.
So what I'm doing, and this is, we're planning on having the, it's going to be done as a webinar on the 15th of February. So about a week, a little less than a week. And what it is it's for people who have our Picture Book Blueprint. What I'm doing is creating a webinar with some additional worksheets that shows you how to use the steps in Picture Book Blueprint to create early level easy readers. And I have some worksheets that you would substitute for certain steps in the Picture Book Blueprint in order to use them for writing an easy reader instead of a picture book. So the webinar is for people who, and it is a paid webinar. It'll be $47, right, John? And it will be a full-length webinar, which we will record, and then it's going to come with, I'm thinking, about 9 to 10 new worksheets that you will.
Did you make clear, Laura, that you have to have Picture Book Blueprint?
That's what I was getting to, yeah. And so it only works if you already own Picture Book Blueprint, because it's actually substituting certain steps. And everybody who has Picture Book Blueprint will be getting an email from us in the next few days explaining this and a link to sign up. But if you don't have Picture Book Blueprint, but it's something you've been thinking about, and now you think, ooh, if I can use it to write easy readers as well, that would be really great. John is putting.
I just put in the chat box
a link there, and that will give you $50 off.
Mm-hmm. It's normally $197, but with this discount, it's $147. And so that way, actually, you can get the Picture Book Blueprint and then also sign up for the Easy Reader thing for the cost of what is typically just the Picture Book Blueprint. So it's essentially like giving you the Easy Reader add-on for free.
Yes.
So again, so just so you understand that what Laura is creating is something that doesn't really work standalone. It's meant to show you how to use PictureBook Blueprint kind of as a Swiss Army knife tool to also create easy readers, and she's creating all new sections on it. And we did that because, you know, we originally thought about doing an entire easy reader blueprint, but you know, there's a certain similarity there, and rather than make you guys buy another, you know, $197 product, for $47 you basically now can turn PictureBook Blueprint into that and easy reader blueprint. So it's kind of kind of our way of trying to make everything more affordable for you and easier. So.
And Lori just asked, once you purchase PictureBook Blueprint, you always have access to the material. Yes, you have lifetime access to it. It lives online, and all of our blueprints are at writingblueprints.com. And the great thing about them being online is that if we have new information to add to the blueprint, we can update it, and you will have immediate access to the new updated information, updated links to resources, that sort of thing. So you will always have that, and you can use it over and over and over.
So basically then, if you have PictureBook Blueprint, keep your eye on the email for the next few days, over the next few days, and you'll get the link to sign up for the webinar. And if you can't do the webinar, that's fine. Just go ahead and sign up anyway, because then it'll show up in Writing Blueprints as part of your bundles. Right. So it doesn't matter if you're there live or not. No. If you don't have PictureBook Blueprint and you want to be able to take advantage of it, go ahead and use the link in the chat box. Don't just go there and pay, because then you'll be paying $197. This way it's $147. So use that link.
Yes. Okay. And thank you for the nice comments there. We appreciate that.
Okay, Laura, do you want to start on?
Yeah, let me look in the Q&A here. So you guys who put questions in the little Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen, and that bar.
Also, by the way, some folks who are watching this on recording right now have emailed us because they couldn't make it live, and that's fine. This is for everybody. So we do have some questions that have already been emailed to us, and for you guys who are here live, if for any future months you can't make it, feel free to do that. You could just shoot us an email, and we'll try to cover it during the webinar.
And someone here in the Q&A put no audio, so I hope you have audio, because I can't tell you how to turn it on if you can't hear me. Okay, so Anita, what services would you recommend to have an easy reader book translated into a foreign language on a budget? That's interesting, because I got another question from someone who can't be here tonight about translation as well. So this is an interesting question, and there's two ways to go about this. First of all, if you are submitting to a publisher who does bilingual books, so if you've written it in English but they are publishing it in English and Spanish, or you've written it in Spanish and you're submitting it to a publisher who does English and Spanish, they generally will translate it for you. So you don't have to worry about it. And for example, this other person who sent in a question, she writes in Spanish, and she wanted to submit it to a bilingual publisher here in the US. I would tell her submit it in Spanish, and they have staff there who can read it and help translate. Now, it would be nice if you could do the cover letter in English, because the person who opens the manuscript needs to be able to at least read the cover letter. As far as if you are self-publishing and you want to submit it in a foreign language, I don't know specifically of services to do that, but before I went on this webinar, I just Googled services to translate documents, and a whole bunch of stuff came up. There's a lot of services that do this.
Actually, what I just put in the chat box was a link to Fiverr. Fiverr has a whole section of translators.
Okay, that's great.
You can't go wrong, because there you're going to be able to pick and choose. You'll see the reviews. You'll see examples of their work. So I would certainly start at Fiverr. So take a look in the chat box for that.
That's a great place to start. Yeah, and I think what you want to do is, if you are translating to another language, you want to get someone who that is their native tongue. You know, they speak English, but they're translating it into their native language so that they can give it the nuances that it needs to really be a great piece of writing.
And by the way, for people watching on the replay, Fiverr is FIVERR.com.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, PictureBook Blueprint doesn't talk about titles, I don't think. No, we don't get a whole lot into how to title your book. But can you talk about the best way to title? How do you know if your title is good? Well, it's different titling a picture book from an older book. So you asked specifically about picture books. Picture book titles, you want them to be catchy. You want them to, you know, a lot of picture books are picked up in the bookstore because of the title and the cover art. And so the title has to have kid appeal, and it has to be catchy, and it has to give the reader some idea of what the book's about. So one of my favorite titles from Mo Willems is "Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus." I mean, that just like, because it's such a funny concept. And the way it's phrased, it wasn't the pigeon who wanted to drive the bus. It was, don't let the pigeon drive the bus. So the title captured the tone of the picture book as well. So that's really important. I think that I must admit, I am not the best person with titles. Some people have a real knack for it. I really don't. So all I can do is tell you things that other writers have told me. You want active words like "don't let the pigeon drive the bus" instead of "the pigeon who wanted to drive the bus." So it's sort of a call to action in the title. Also, it's a great idea to go on Amazon and Google the title you want to use and make sure it's not already being used by another book. You certainly don't want that. And then I think just if you have a critique group or in the Picture Book Blueprint, you know, if you belong to the Facebook group, I would ask for feedback on your title from other picture book writers. Our Facebook group is a great place to do that and get their reaction to it. I think getting that outside input is really important with titles because you want it to hit people on an emotional level, and so you have to make sure that you've done that. Okay, Tracy, for writers who write both picture books and young adult middle grade, if they sell picture books first, will they have a harder time breaking into the older kidlit genres? No, absolutely not. A lot of authors do that. And some authors choose a different pen name for their older work, especially if your middle grade or YA is kind of, you know, has more sort of controversial subjects, or you deal with things that maybe the picture book readers might find, you know, the parents who buy the picture books might not like their kids to be reading about. I don't know. But no, it's they're different markets, and agents and publishers love authors who can write across age groups and have a lot of books in them. So I don't think it hurts you at all. Keep going down here. These are good questions, you guys. Okay, when submitting to agents, should they be told if that particular manuscript is presently on submission to an editor who requested it from a conference? Would it be helpful or harmful to mention it? Yes, you should definitely mention it to an agent, because that is an agent. That's a selling point to an agent, that an editor has requested this manuscript. What you sometimes get into a little, I wouldn't say trouble, but some editors don't like having a manuscript submitted to them, and then they might contact you and say they're interested in publishing it, and then you go, oh, by the way, now I have an agent. Because when an editor actually contacts you to make an offer on the manuscript, they have done a lot of work with everybody else in the publishing house to figure out how much the book's going to sell, how much they can offer you, et cetera, et cetera. And they have one set of numbers for authors who are agented and another set of numbers for authors who are not agented. So I'm not saying you shouldn't do this, but what I'm saying is if you have already submitted it to an editor who requested it, and if that editor is reading it and you think that editor has some interest, I would let that editor know immediately if you actually get representation, so that they know as early as possible in the process, and they can set up their negotiating wheels accordingly. But definitely it's a good thing to let the agent know as well, because they'll follow up with the editor on your behalf as well.
I'll take one here from Deborah, who asks, what is the best way to have a successful first book launch in marketing?
Good question.
The best way to do that is to have a fan base in place. That is, having followers, having people who have some relationship with you. The example that I always use, if you have Easy Author Marketing, which was my program, I talk there about trying to build a community around a subject matter that you write about. So let's say that you're writing, and the example I use here is if you're writing a book about baseball at the turn of the 20th century, you might start a community, a Facebook group, for example, about that subject where you show pictures of old baseball players and rare footage or whatever, and start building people into that community and communicating with them and sharing with them and getting to know them and showing some leadership. Because then and even talking to them about your book as it's in process. And then when you release your book, you're releasing it into a welcoming community. What happens is that people don't try to build a community. They put their book out, they just start going around on Facebook groups, throwing up pictures of their book cover or sending it on Twitter or something. And of course it falls on deaf ears. Nobody knows you, nobody knows your book, and nobody really cares. So the best thing you could be doing is trying to find a way to build community, whether it's around the subject of your book, whether it's about an overall theme that you write about. But try to reach out to people where they are, as opposed to trying to get them to care about you. Let them care about something that you have in common. And definitely also, spend plenty of time kind of with behind the scenes stuff. So if you have this Facebook group, take pictures periodically of you working at your computer. Oh, look what I just found that's going in the book, or here I am, I just finished the 5th chapter, or what have you. People like to feel invested in what they're doing. So I think that's the best advice I can give you. Tactics and techniques and social media platforms and all that sort of stuff are nice, but you can't beat having a community.
Mm-hmm. True, very true. I'm going to answer a couple questions here that came in from people who will be listening on the replay. I'd like to find a place where I may find contests for children's writers, books, or awards for first-time writers. So we do mention those quite often in Children's Book Insider. I try to mention the ones, certainly the contests that have some sort of award with them as far as a cash award or publication or something. I try to mention every one that I can find. Another good place to find contests is in this book, Children's Writers and Illustrators Market, published by Writers Digest Books, and it's updated every year, so the 2017 edition. They have a whole section at the end on contests and workshops. So, and they have a lot of regional contests in here. So a lot of times there's like the, Colorado State Children's Book Awards, and if you have, they're generally for published books, but if you have recently published a book, you can submit it to a award like that. So that's another good resource for you. Let me do one more from here. Okay. Let me just see if I can summarize this question. She said she has a picture book. She doesn't have a main character in it. She uses the word you, speaking directly to the reader. And an example she gives is kind of like, Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. She said her story's got a very different topic. It's a funny book, but she's wondering about that. And I think that's a great, I don't even use the word gimmick, sort of format for a book. The great thing about picture books right now is publishers are becoming more and more open to new ways of telling a story. And there's really very few limits anymore on how you can write your picture book. So addressing the reader directly as you in the book is great. It pulls the kid right into the story. You want to make sure that what you're asking them to do or look at, which is going to take place in the pictures, is interesting enough and actually leads them through some sort of plot so that there is an ending. And maybe it's a joke at the end, something funny, something surprising. But yes, I think that that can work quite well for a picture book. Okay, let's see. Let me see in the chat box here. When you are doing a word count of your manuscript for agents editors, do you include everything in your submission, including your name, address, etc.? No. Your word count is the actual text of the story. You don't have to include the headers, the footers, anything like that. And when you're submitting to book publishers, you can round it to the nearest 20, 25 words. When you're submitting to a magazine, you have to give them exactly how many words are in your manuscript, but you don't include the title, your name, any of that stuff. What if an editor says they usually don't work with unagented writers? Then you can't submit to them unless you have an agent. However, very often editors speak at conferences and workshops, and they say they are open to submissions from attendees of those workshops, usually for a certain period of time. When we do our Picture Book Summit online workshop, we have usually several of the editors who we interview in, we have an recorded interview editor panel that runs during the workshop. And often those editors will take submissions from our attendees, even if they're not taking them from anyone else. So those are the opportunities you would have to get into an editor who is generally closed to unagented submissions.
By the way, I want to take a break here because I have a cool tip for you guys, especially if you are writing a book that takes place in an actual location somewhere. I was having fun the other day messing around with Google Street View, which is part of Google Earth. And if you ever seen those little cars that drive around with a little Google, they say Google inside and they have the camera, what they're doing is literally taking a picture of both sides of every street in America and actually all over the world now. And I was looking at a place that's always fascinated me is the Pitcairn Islands, which is our little island in South Pacific. It's where the mutiny on the Bounty happened, and there's like 200 people live there. It's like the most remote place where people live, and I was just curious about it. So I checked on Google Street View whether it was covered, and in fact it was, the entire island. And it's almost like you could drive just by using your mouse. You could drive down any street, any of these little dirt roads, drive right through this little town and explore. So if you want to create a real setting for your story, wherever it might be, even a place that obscure, use Google Street View. And you could actually, if you want to say that, okay, he was on the corner of Elm and Main in Winnetka, Illinois, you could literally go to Elm and Main and describe exactly what's actually there, which is a pretty amazing thing. So it's one of those tools that maybe you don't think about, but if you want to explore and you want to really add tremendous authenticity to your place settings, spend some time on there. So just a little tip. Great.
Yep. It's amazing how much you can research now without leaving your desk. Yeah. Oh, Sunny just said she has to leave. She's sick. I'm sorry, Sunny. We'll catch you on the replay. I hope you feel better. Okay, how important is it to get an agent? It's one of those it depends answers. If you are writing middle grade or young adult, it's becoming more and more important to get an agent. And there are a lot of agents out there taking middle grade and young adult manuscripts. Picture books, it's certainly helpful to get it if you want to get into the bigger publishers, but there are still a lot of the smaller publishers that are taking manuscripts directly from writers in picture books. So it kind of depends on, if your dream is to be published by Random House or Scholastic, one of those big publishers, you are going to need an agent regardless of what you're writing. If you're want to get published by Lee and Low or Holiday House or you know, some of the publishers that do great books, but they're a little bit smaller and they publish maybe 15 books a year instead of 75 on their children's book list, you still have a good shot of just submitting. Now, an agent will always get your manuscript read faster than sending it directly yourself, just because they the editors tend to take the submissions from agents and read them first. So if that's important to you, to be quicker, I would definitely suggest submitting to agents. You will give up part of your money to the agent. They get paid on commission. Everything you make, you pay them a commission. But a lot of authors feel that's very, very worth it. So you just have to weigh what's important to you. Okay, a lot of people are talking about Google Earth and Bing. Okay. How do you handle back matter, i.e. additional interesting facts in the word count? Do you count it along with the text or separately? I always mention it separately, especially in a picture book, because when the editor is thinking about how many pages are going to be devoted to illustration, the back matter is not going to be part of that. But as you are creating your picture book, and in Picture Book Blueprint, I recommend that you create a dummy and lay your book out, even if you're not illustrating it, so you can see where the page turns go and you can see how many pages you actually have. You want to make sure you reserve at least one page for that back matter. So it might mean you're going to need to shorten your story a little bit. But I would give that as a separate word count when you're submitting. Okay, I'm going to go to Q&A. John, do you see anything you want to add?
Someone just pointed out that Google Earth actually includes Mars.
Wow.
Which is pretty cool. Evelyn said she
That's awesome.
Mars for one of her UIA projects. That's incredible. Yeah.
That's amazing. So see, you can cancel your trip to Mars. You don't have to go. You can.
How about Laura? How about you just do Google Earth for Aruba since you're.
No. I'm not researching it. I want to experience it. Okay. Your thoughts on an inanimate object for protagonist. I wrote a story about an unmatched socks in a drawer, and one of them was the protagonist. A professional critique person told me that's a no-no. Inanimate objects are becoming more acceptable because we have some very creative writers who have turned them into amazing books. Whenever you use an inanimate object, you have to think about the limitations of that object. So if your story is a pair of socks in a drawer, are those socks ever going to get out of the drawer? And if so, how are they going to do it? And if they never get out of the drawer, what is that going to do to your illustrations? Picture books are a visual medium, so you want to make sure that there's enough action and enough interesting things going on for the illustrator to draw, so you're not just having the same illustration appear over and over and over. The other thing you have to do with inanimate objects is somehow make them appealing to children and relatable. So what is the problem these socks have? Is it that they've lost their best friend or their twin and they need to find them? That can be a problem that a kid can relate to. If it's just, oh, I'm a sock without a partner, I don't know if that's enough. So you have to develop that character as if it is not an inanimate object. It has to have a personality and a conflict and a problem that they want to solve, and then think about how is that object going to be able to creatively solve that problem given the limitations of that object. So socks don't move on their own. Is something else going to come into the drawer to move the sock? These are the kinds of problems you have to think about in order to create a great story, but it's possible if you're really, really creative and have a great imagination. Scroll down here too. I wonder if a picture book or short story for a children's magazine can work if the action happens to the main characters if they are inanimate. That's interesting. We have two inanimate object characters here, or questions. So they're not moving the action themselves if the action happens to them. Again, it's tricky. You have to be really good. There was, I believe, gosh, I referred to this book before in a webinar, and I think I had the wrong author. It's called The Scarecrow. It's either called The Scarecrow or Scarecrow, and I believe Cynthia Rylant is the author, but I am not positive. But Cynthia Rylant is an amazing author. It's Rylant. And the whole book is just this scarecrow sitting in this field and watching the world change around him. So he's not moving, but the world is moving around him. Things are happening. And it's beautifully told. And of course, the illustrations really make the book. If you could do that, it has to have very powerful language. It has to have a purpose beyond this object. So the object is sort of a conduit for the larger story that's going on around them. It can work. Those kinds of books are hard to sell, especially if you're a first-time author. Cynthia Rylant is not a first-time author. Because they are quiet stories, they're harder to market. So if it's your first book, you might want to consider writing something else first that's a little more conventional as far as the format, and then coming back to that. But it's not impossible. But it just takes a lot more than just the story. The words have to be amazing. It has to be a really interesting concept. It has to lend itself to incredible illustrations, and then it's possible. Let's see.
While Laura is looking for that, I have a favor to ask you guys.
Okay.
If you enjoy CBI, and I hope you do, and if you enjoy writing blueprints, and I hope you do, please tell folks about it. You know, we don't have much in the way of a marketing budget, and so we certainly depend on our loyal customers sharing the word. So if you're hanging around writing blogs or Facebook groups or message boards, or you go to a writing conference and you want to say some nice stuff about us or point some people to writingblueprints.com, we would certainly appreciate it.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. We would appreciate that. Okay, my publishing company went out of business. I have 2 books that I would like to have available to kids. I own the text. The illustrator owns the illustrations. Do I need to find someone who can change the illustrations and make it the second edition? If the original illustrator does not want to work with you on bringing out this book, I assume you want to self-publish it and make it available, then yes, you would have to find someone else to illustrate it, because you can't use the original illustrations. So my first suggestion is to approach the original illustrator, unless there's a reason you don't want to do that. That would be the easiest thing to do. And then you can split the cost, and you can split the money 50-50 with, you know, any money that you make. Barring that, yes, you would have to find someone else to re-illustrate it for you, which you can learn, or you can go to our webinar on the 28th and learn how to do it yourself. Okay, Donna asks, what is your thoughts on writing 2 different genres at the same time? For example, picture books and a murder mystery at the same time. So this is similar to a question we had earlier. Certainly in the writing process, a lot of authors bounce back and forth between projects. You hit kind of a wall with one, and so you jump to the other, and then suddenly it opens up your mind to what you needed to do on the first project. So a lot of authors do that. And publishing in 2 genres, again, absolutely fine. If you're writing adult books that maybe have, again, murder, romance, sex, things like that, you might want to use a pen name for one of them to kind of separate your persona as an author. That's just up to you.
Laura, have you gone through the ones that were sent in advance, or do you want to?
Not all of them.
Okay.
I can click on a few more here. Okay, this Mary asks, she's working on a picture book manuscript. She has 2 main characters in her picture book manuscript because they are destined for the same thing. She says she briefly introduced the 2 of them, and then gives more detail on the first one and then the second one. And a member of her critique group thought she should only have 1 main character. So in general, you want to have only 1 main character in your picture books, because your reader's attention, first of all, it's such a short story. It's hard to fully develop more than 1 main character. Secondly, it's important for the young child to know who they're following through the story. And so the character who has the problem to solve or the conflict is the one that they're going to be following through the story. And you want your readers to become emotionally invested in that character. If you have two characters, each with a problem, you're splitting that reader's emotional investment. And if you've only got 800 words or so to do this, you're using up a lot of your words for something that you might not need to do. So if you can possibly do it with one character, that's best. She used in her question, she mentioned the book Sam and Dave Dig a Hole. The reason that book works with two characters is Sam and Dave basically are one character. They both have the same problem. They're both want to dig a hole until they find something spectacular. That's their goal. And so they're working on this together, and they're always together in the book. So they're treated like one character. They're just two people. And so you can do that in a picture book. But separating out two main characters where you're kind of pulling the reader in two different directions, that's tough to do. You really need a longer format like a chapter book, middle grade YA, to do that kind of story. Let's see, we'll get back to the Q&A here.
There's one in the chat. Let me read this one to you. Have we done this one? Does every single story need to have a story arc and a conflict to overcome, even if it is a story in rhyme or just a feel-good story for little ones?
So what you're asking about is some younger picture books are what I call linear stories. So they're more a series of events that kind of are linked together either because they happen one after the other, or it's, you know, how this one character spent her day, and there's not really a problem to solve. And those stories are often rhyming, and they're for the youngest end of the picture book group. They might be a bedtime story, that kind of thing. What I have found is the linear stories that really work and stand the test of time, they still have something that pushes the reader through the book. Either something funny that we think is going to happen, and so we have to keep turning the pages to see if it happens, or something mysterious or exciting. There's got to be some sort of energy that pulls the reader through the story. It doesn't necessarily have to be a problem to solve. A couple really examples a lot of you probably know. If you give a mouse a cookie, it's a linear story, and it's really cause and effect. If you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for a glass of milk. If you give him a glass of milk, he's going to ask for a straw. And you go on and on and on. And then you end up where you started. At the very end, the boy has given the mouse everything he wanted, and then the mouse at the very end asks for a cookie again. So you're right back where you started. That's funny. It's a circular story. The boy wasn't really trying to solve a big problem. He was just trying to give the mouse what he wanted. Now in the illustrations, there was a problem because we saw Mom in the background out the window in the garden. And this mouse was creating a huge mess in the house. And Mom starts getting closer and closer to the house in the pictures. So if you're paying attention to the pictures, there is that tension there of, what's going to happen when Mom walks in? But that wasn't in the text. Another classic book that a lot of you probably know is a Sesame Street book called There's a Monster at the End of This Book. It's with Grover. And the whole book, Grover's just saying, don't turn the page, there's a monster at the end of the book. So of course the reader turns the page. Don't turn the page, there's a monster at the end of the book. So the kids are going to keep turning the page to see the monster, and then at the end there's a joke as to who the monster really is. That kind of thing works because, again, there's a reason to keep turning the pages. If it's just a quiet story about, here's a day at the beach, and first we collected seashells, and then we played in the water, and then we built a sandcastle, there's really not anything that's going to demand repeated reading. And no parent's going to buy a book that they're only going to read once. So just think about that, if you can infuse some sort of energy or reason to turn the pages in your linear story. How does a cover letter differ from a query letter? Okay, so a query letter is a letter that you are sending to an editor or an agent that describes your manuscript. It gives a synopsis, and you are asking if you can submit the manuscript. Now, some agents and editors say, if you're writing a book with chapters, send a query letter and the first 2 chapters, but you're not sending the entire manuscript. So the query letter, especially in the synopsis, has to give the tone of the story, has to let the editor know who the protagonist is, what the conflict is, some of the attempts that the character makes to overcome this problem, and then at least hint at the ending. A cover letter goes on top of the entire manuscript. So if you are allowed to submit the entire manuscript to an editor or agent, you simply have a brief cover letter that just gives the title of the book, the word count, the age range, and maybe a 1-sentence description so that they kind of get a sense of what kind of manuscript it is. It's a mystery story, a humorous mystery story that takes place in, you know, Maine or whatever. And then a little bit about yourself, just a brief paragraph, if you have any writing experience, that kind of thing. And that's it, because they're going to have the entire manuscript. So cover letter shorter. Query letter is really almost a sales pitch for your manuscript. You want to intrigue them enough that they're going to ask you to send the entire manuscript, and then you'll put the cover letter on top of that.
Okay, here's one from Marianne. She asked, if you are doing a nonfiction picture book, how much citation of science fact is necessary? And I just got very blurry for a minute. Come on back.
Oh.
Okay.
How much citation of science fact? Are you saying in the actual text or in the bibliography? I'm not sure what you're asking there, so I'll answer both of those questions. As far as facts within the text, it depends on the age level of the book that you're writing. But as far as citing, you mean footnotes and that kind of thing, it very much depends on the publisher and whether it's an educational publisher that are selling directly to schools or a trade publisher that sells their books to bookstores. Some of those books also appear in schools, but it is not an educational only market. With any kind of nonfiction book, it's always great to attach a bibliography with your manuscript, and often even picture books will have a bibliography or further reading type thing in the back. I think, frankly, now that I'm thinking through this question, it's not a bad idea to do your citations in the manuscript as footnotes, because the editor can always say, we don't need those in the actual book. But this will show that you've done your research, and it will show the kind of sources you used. You want to have primary sources, recent sources, interviews with experts, that kind of thing as much as possible. So making that clear on the manuscript itself is probably not a bad idea. So I would suggest you do that. I hope that answered the question. Let me go to another one that's been emailed to us. When an agent goes to another agency, does the writer follow the agent or stay with the agency? Does the author have a choice? Okay, so this is if you have a literary agent, you are a client, and that agent moves to a new agency. Sometimes that agent will take her clients with her, and sometimes she won't. And yes, you would always have a choice as the author. So if you love your agent and she says, do you want to come with me to my new job? You have that option. If you prefer to stay with the original agency but get a new agent, you would have that option too. However, your agent, whatever books your agent sold with the original agency, she would still be getting commission on those books as long as they are selling. And it depends on her contract whether the commission would go to that agent or the commission would stay with your original agency. I don't know what that agreement would be. But when an agent sells your work, they continue to get commission on that work as long as that book is in print and making money. Okay.
I'm not seeing anything else in the chat, so if anybody has more questions, we still have a little bit of time.
I still have some in the Q&A and in the email, so,
Okay.
but please put more in the chat and I'll get through these. Should I include a synopsis with my submitted manuscript to an editor? Yes, and you know, every editor asks for something different. So you want to make sure you check that editor's submission guidelines, which are usually on their website. So sometimes if you're, even if you're submitting an entire book, if it's a novel, they usually ask for a synopsis along with the full manuscript. So you want to give the editor what they ask for. If you're submitting a picture book, they often want the entire manuscript. So then you would do a cover letter with just like a 1 or 2 sentence description of your book. And really, if you're submitting a very short description of your book, what you want to do is focus on the hook. So what makes this manuscript different? So it's not, you know, I wrote a bedtime story. This is a bedtime story that takes place on Mars, and how aliens put their children to bed. Okay, that's different. That's a hook. And if your story doesn't have a hook, I would suggest that you go back and look at your manuscript before you submit it and see if there's anything you can add to it that makes it a little bit different and makes it stand out. An editor needs to be able to go to their editorial meeting and sum up your manuscript in a couple sentences and say, this is great because blah, 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 and we've never published anything like this. So you need to point out to the editor what's so unique about your story when you submit a synopsis or a query letter or a cover letter. Have that hook in it.
Okay, let's see. I have another one here from Deanne. If you have an action-based plot, do you need to include lots of character emotion in a middle grade story?
Yes. The difference between a character-driven book and a plot-driven book is plot-driven books are very action-based. There's an outward conflict or problem that the character is solving. It usually involves other characters, their relationship with their peer group, or, you know, I want to get the lead in a school play, but I have stage fright, you know, that sort of thing. A character-driven book is usually more internal, so it has to do with some fear that's holding them back that they have to overcome on the inside. However, even action-based books need that internal element in middle grade and young adult, because especially middle grade, it's such an angst-driven period of adolescence and puberty that kids live inside their head. So even if these characters are going through an action-based story, they're still going to be very inward focused and, you know, oh God, everyone thinks I'm an idiot, and I need to go talk to that girl, but I can't make the words come out of my mouth, and you know, that sort of thing. So there's a balance, is what I'm trying to say. And a middle grade book without any kind of emotion or inner life of your characters is gonna feel very flat and not substantial enough. Now, chapter books, younger books, have less of that. They're much more outer focused and dealing with what's going on outside of the characters than what's going on the inside. So I hope that made sense. Sorry, I'm so thirsty tonight.
Sherry asks, how do I find publishers who publish number books?
You mean like concept books that deal with numbers and learning numbers, that kind of thing? A great way to find these publishers is to go on Amazon, and in the when you go on the Amazon homepage, up at the top by the search bar, there's a little pull down menu that says departments. Click on that, and then you click on children's books. And then once you get to children's books, down the left side of the screen, there's all sorts of categories you can pick. So you could pick by age group. So I would pick the youngest age group, and then you can go down and pick, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe there's a numbers category. If not, there would be a concept book category. So click those, and then whatever comes up, you'll have lots of books that deal with numbers, and look and see who publishes them. That's one of the best ways to figure out how to do this. So use Amazon as your search engine, and then you can go directly to those publishers' websites and really look at their catalogs. Most publishers have their catalogs online, and you can really see what they're doing as far as those kinds of books. And you want to make sure that your number book is very different from ones that are already out there, because we have lots of number books. So you have to come up with a new hook to your book. Okay, can you suggest some educational publishers for a middle grade book? So again, this book, Children's Writers and Illustrators Market, is a great resource for that kind of thing, because it has publisher listings, and they actually have a little icon, a little apple, next to the publisher listings if they're educational publishers. So that's a good place to look. And then also, whenever we have educational publishers, we designate that, you know, we'll say who they are in Children's Book Insider. A few off the top of my head, Lerner Books is good, L-E-R-N-E-R. And they also have Carol Rhoda, one word, and Lerner are the same company, but they just deal with different age groups. But they publish for schools. Another one is called Enslow, E-N-S-L-O-W Publishers. They do a lot of nonfiction. And then a third one off the top of my head is called Barron's Educational Series. And they actually do all kinds of books. It's kind of a weird name for the publisher. But again, a lot of books that go directly to schools. So they have an educational element, even if they're fiction, they have an educational element to them. Let's see. Okay, my mother is an artist, 93 years old, and still painting. Should I ask her to try to illustrate my picture book? I may never use it, but if I do, would I submit with the art and then tell them about my mother as an illustrator? So this is a great question, because it's wonderful that your mother is 93 and still painting. And it's always fun to ask her to illustrate. And that would certainly be something that you would always have, which is great. When you submit to the publisher, if you want to submit her art, I would suggest that you say in your cover letter, first of all, you'd only submit 1 or 2 samples of her art, and they would be copies, never send original artwork. And say that these are from your mother, and you are submitting them simply as a suggestion for the illustrations, but you understand if the publisher wants to find a different illustrator. If you don't say that and the publisher likes your text but not the art, or vice versa, they're going to reject the entire project because they think it has to go together. And it also depends on the quality of your mother's art. If she's an incredibly talented artist, of course, that's always wonderful, and it will be a much better chance of the publisher wanting to take both. You also have the option, if you want to do something really wonderful with your mother, of self-publishing with her art and using the Kindle KDP Kids Book Creator, which is a program that Amazon has created to do illustrated books for Kindle. And you can use your mother's art and your text and make it into an ebook. And if you don't know how to do that, we actually have a course called Picture Ebook Mastery that explains all how to do that.
And so you can find that out, that's on writingblueprints.com.
Yes. So that's another good option for you. And then you'd have that, and then you could still someday submit it to publishers, but you would have this nice ebook that you could send out to your family and friends and stuff.
Okay, Marianne asks, what do you think about big words? Do I need to dumb down or describe?
you never dumb down. You never want to dumb down for your readers. And I don't know what kind of book you're writing. If you're writing a picture book, vocabulary in picture book is actually is a lot richer and more interesting and diverse than a lot of people realize, because these books are meant to be read out loud to kids. So as long as kids can understand the word within the context of the sentence, and maybe with some illustration cues to help them, you can use it. And in fact, it's interesting to hear big, interesting words, but you want to use them appropriately, and you don't want to just throw a lot of big words in just because. They have to fit the story. If you're writing easy readers, which I'll be talking about on the webinar next week, you have to be careful about your words, because these are for kids who are learning to read on their own. So the language is much simpler. But once you get beyond that, chapter books, middle grade, YA, again, if the word fits the tone of the story, if the word fits the character that you're writing about, and if it's understandable within the context of the sentence, then you're fine. And that even goes with nonfiction. Now, with nonfiction, sometimes authors will give a word and then sort of define it within the sentence as well, so that the reader understands what that word is, if it's a scientific term or something like that. But in fiction, as long as it's understandable within everything else that's going on in those couple of sentences and fits the voice of the story, you're okay.
We have a couple more minutes left. Here's one from Della. Not sure if you, can you define and talk about lyrical writing for picture books that works and would actually catch an editor's eye?
Can I define and talk about lyrical writing as opposed to rhyming writing? The best thing I can tell you is to read writers who do wonderful lyrical books. Cynthia Rylant, who I spoke about before, does. Patricia McLachlan, it's MacLachlan. Patricia McLachlan. She wrote Sarah Plain and Tall, which is a chapter book, but she's written a lot of picture books too. She's just one of the most amazing writers. In fact, her most recent chapter book is called The Poet's Dog, and it is one of the most beautifully written books that I've read in a long time. And even if you're a picture book writer, I think you should read this book, The Poet's Dog. So the rhythm of this kind of writing is so beautiful, and that's really what catches an editor's eye. Sharon Creech is another author, Creech, who writes lovely lyrical books, and she wrote, again, a chapter book called Love That Dog. Dogs are a theme tonight. That incorporated poetry and prose into the story, and it was, again, beautiful. And it was written for like that 7, 8, 9-year-old reader. So it's not that far removed from picture book writing. So that's another great writer to study. I'm sorry, I lost track of the original question. I just kind of got off on books there. What was the original question?
It's about lyrical writing and how to catch an editor's eye. How to catch an editor's eye.
The tricky part about lyrical writing or writing in rhyme is that it has to be spare. The fewer words, the more powerful each word becomes. So each word is very important, and the choice of the words is very important. So this is where you really get into that show, don't tell. So you want to look at your verbs and your nouns and make sure that they are specific, but also interesting, and really capture exactly what you want to say. And the other thing with lyrical writing is you want to make sure that the length of your sentences matches the emotion that you're trying to convey. So long sentences are going to slow down the pace and really make the reader think. Shorter sentences are faster and they convey tension or action. And these are all elements of lyrical writing. So again, the best thing I can tell you is to just read a lot of books and really start pulling out, if a book catches your ear, if you read it and you're like, that I would love to hear this book read out loud because it's got such a wonderful rhythm to it. Analyze it, type it out, count how many words are in each sentence, count how many short sentences there are and how many long ones, and decide why did they change from a short sentence to a long one. So really start breaking down the writing of these authors that you love, and that is going to teach you a lot about how to write like that. Let me go quick to the emailed questions because I think I have a couple more. I don't want to leave anybody out. Okay, so one person asked, do you think a story about a child living through World War II in London is appropriate for a picture book? And she talks about what the child did during the war, air raid practice, hearing planes overhead, etc. But the child feels safe because she has her mother, teacher, and friends for support. Her dad has gone to war. She thinks about his return and finds hope in something special to sustain her. Yes, I think that is a perfectly good topic for a story. Historical fiction is always good in picture books, especially if you can really evoke that time through small details that children would find interesting. So during the air raid drills, where did they go? What did they do? Did they play games in the air raid shelter? Was the child afraid? Did the parents keep her from being afraid? Did she have a teddy bear down there? You know, things like that that can allow modern day kids to put themselves back into that situation in that period of time and feel what that child felt. I don't think these topics are too scary, especially if it's handled the way this writer said about how the family was there to support and she was thinking about her father coming home and finds hope in something special to sustain her. I assume that's something special she had from her dad. So yes, you would want a book like this to have a true ending. So you'd want to have dad come home, you know, something like that. Because picture book audience, they like to have that satisfying ending. But certainly before we get to that ending, you can have the drama of living through this period of time. And kids want to know, like, what did they eat in the air raid shelter? And what did they wear? And do they have TV? And things like that. So you want to deal with that. Okay. Joan Ramirez says, I went to Vietnam to teach many years ago and wrote a picture book that speaks to the heart about a girl missing her mother. I've tried so many places to get it published. Any suggestions? Okay, so multicultural literature that takes place in other countries is very, very in demand right now. And so some publishers specialize in it, like Lee and Low is a picture book. Well, they do actually all kinds of books now. A publisher, excuse me, sort of that medium-sized publisher that specializes in multicultural stories. Now, they like their authors and illustrators to be people of color. You don't necessarily have to be of the culture that you're writing about, but their big thing is to promote authors and illustrators of color. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing I would suggest is to go to the website called WeNeedDiverseBooks.com. So it's all one word, WeNeedDiverseBooks.com. This is an organization that started a couple years ago to really promote diversity in children's literature. And they have lots of book lists of diverse books. And what you want to do is look through the picture books and then look them up on Amazon and see who published those picture books. And that will give you a list of publishers who are open to these kinds of stories. So that's a good way to do some of that research. Okay, I have one very long question here that I'll save for the end because I want to get through the people who are here. So, anything else new in the chat box, John?
I don't. Let me see here. Nope. Our folks are satisfied.
Okay. One here. What advice would you give to a beginner about sharing writing dreams with family and friends? So often when you are starting out as a writer, the first question people ask you is, what have you published? Which is really an unfair question, because it means they have no idea how long it takes to learn how to write and to create a great manuscript and then submit it and get it published. So you have to be careful not to let those kind of questions deflate you. So it's important that you consider yourself a writer starting right now. If you are writing, you are a writer. Once you are published, you can call yourself a published author, but you can always call yourself a writer. And hang on to that identity, and don't let those questions, don't get defensive and start making excuses, you know. So what have you published? I'm working on my first manuscript. I'm very excited about it. And, you know, I'm starting to create a list of publishers I'm going to submit it to when it's ready. You don't have to make excuses. As far as sharing story ideas, again, it's tricky because if the idea is really new and not really well developed, they might start picking holes in it or asking questions about it that you're not ready to answer. So I think just feeling confident about who you are and what you're doing, and always being very positive when you talk about it, and making it clear you're taking it seriously, which will help when you're writing and you don't want to be disturbed. They will respect your writing time. And then just, you know, make sure you surround yourself with like-minded writers, either online, through a critique group, through our Facebook groups, that can help give you that support and encouragement, because you need to have that from people who are going through the same thing. Okay, I want to make sure.
Someone just did have another question here, and I'm just double checking on the answer here. Someone's asking, let's see, let me get to the question.
Good, I'm glad John's researching.
Evelyn, how can PC users get books on iBooks without having to purchase a Mac? So you're probably going to go through a third party like Smashwords, but one that people seem to really like is draft2digital.com. That's draft, the number 2, and then digital.com. And I guess they get 10% of sales, but then they'll convert it into any format you want and help you get it up into the iBooks store. I'm going to keep looking for more solutions here for you, but that was one I wanted to give you. Draft2digital with the number 2 in the middle.com.
Okay. There is a question here from Lori. Do you critique picture book manuscripts? You know the genre so well. Thank you. And at this point, I am not doing one-on-one critiques because I'm so busy creating all these products and courses and stuff. We do have at our picture book the Blueprint Facebook group, there is a critique group that I did not start. One of our members started it, and it's an online critique group with other blueprinters. And if that one's full, I'm sure there will be enough people interested to start a second one. So that's a great place to join a critique group of people who are all working on picture books. I do have a couple other places I can recommend. If you email me privately, I can give you some names of people who critique. But right now I'm just too busy doing other stuff. Down the road, we might have group coaching and that sort of thing, but we haven't set that up yet. So we're working on it. How do I submit a book for consideration to be placed in the Dolly Parton Library?
I am looking up the Dolly Parton Library.
I have no idea.
While we're here. So you guys, you go on to another question. I'll see what I come up with.
I've never had that question, but we'll find out for you.
Well, it's called the Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. And they send out free books to kids. It's a really cool program. But the question is, how do you get your books included in it? So let me see what I can find. You carry on.
Oh, here's a couple more in the Q&A box here. There are numerous writing contests that require an entry fee. Are these worth the money? I was told once by a writers group to avoid them. You know, it used to be that was the case, but more and more contests, they're charging, and usually it's like 20, 30 bucks. You know, it's not a huge fee, because It takes a tremendous amount of time to read all the manuscripts that come in. They usually have judges that are maybe published authors or editors who they're asking to read through all these manuscripts, so they want to pay them for their time. And usually there's a cash prize for the winner. So if it's a writing contest put on by an organization that looks reputable, there is a cash prize involved for the winner, possibly publication. And the entry fee is fairly nominal. I would say $50 or less. I think it's absolutely legitimate. The ones that we mention in CBI that might have an entry fee are ones that I've checked out and they have proven to be legitimate for year after year. So I feel comfortable about putting them in the newsletter. You can always Google the contest and just see if you see any comments from other people who have participated in previous years who weren't happy with it. So you can always do that kind of research. But it's not that uncommon, especially if it's a nonprofit organization putting on the contest. They have to justify the time involved and pay people to do that. So I don't think there's a problem with that.
I do have a link for the Dolly Parton
Oh, good.
Library. And for the folks that are not seeing the chat box because you're watching it, if you're curious, it is usa.imaginationlibrary.com/book_committee.php. usa.imaginationlibrary.com/book_committee.php. And they don't have like an entry form, but they do have the names of the people who select the books. So you could track down the people's names here and email them directly. I think that would probably be the way to go here.
Okay. Got a few more in the Q&A here. Okay, from Linda. Says, I made a very inexperienced decision to self-publish through a company who, for a set fee, would help me through the process. I was not versed in being truly naive, fell into selling myself short by changing my story to fit the literal round hole. Outcome was a published book that had lovely illustrations with a few minor mistakes, few grammar boo-boos, etc. Can be bought through various sites, but I chose not to promote it due to the ridiculous price of the paperback book. Excuse me. The main reason, though, I just simply want to rewrite it to my original storyline. Okay, so basically she's saying this is a mistake, an expensive mistake. Is it possible to rewrite a book previously published and still use the same title? What are the illustrator's rights if I were to republish? I would want to totally use new illustrations. Okay, so the way I understand this is you paid a company. There are companies out there that help you if you want to self-publish. They'll help you design the book, lay it out, find the illustrator. Sometimes they do some marketing for you, sometimes they don't. And my understanding is you went with one of these companies and you're not happy with the results, except the illustrations are lovely. And you want to essentially change the text and republish it. If this was your book and you own the rights to it, my suggestion would be to pull the original off the market and then create your new version with the same title if you want and put it up there. Now, as far as the illustrations, it depends who owns the illustrations. And so this is a really complicated question. If you paid the illustrator a flat fee for the illustrations and you own them, you can then use them again. But if the illustrator did not give you copyright of the illustrations, they own them. So I think this sounds like something you might want to consult a publishing attorney about. I'm sure you have agreements with this original company, with the illustrator, that sort of thing. And I think it would be worth paying a lawyer for an hour of their time to go over this and advise you on what you should do so you don't get into trouble legally with the publisher and that sort of thing. So that would be my suggestion there.
Well, we're about done. Do you want to take one more if you have one?
There's like 5 more.
Well, that's up to you. You're the one who's doing all the thinking tonight. I'm just sitting here.
I know. I'll try to get through these next 5 as fast as I can. Okay, we have another question about the Dolly Parton Library. So John put a link up. Okay. Who knew? Okay. Another question concerns writing poetry for children. If I wanted to use my poetry in a way to also incorporate a crafted project and sell it at an art fair, is it possible to publish it in book form? I think so. I mean, if you have poetry and you're incorporating it into a piece of art and selling it in a completely different non-publishing arena, and then you want to use that poetry and publish it in a book, I don't see a problem with that because it's completely different. I would tell them, if you're submitting it to a publisher, I would mention to them that this poem appeared in this form, in this piece of art, just so they know. But it's a completely different medium, and I don't think that's a problem. Okay, maybe John can take this. What forms of social media would be best to market a self-published picture book before or when it comes out? So how to market a picture book on social media. I have a couple things, and then maybe John has some extra ideas. When you're marketing a picture book online, you're really marketing it to parents and teachers, not the kids. So think about that as you are creating your platform, your social media platform. So John, do you have any ideas on how to reach these people?
Well, I think actually, I would look at Pinterest. Selling a picture book is really typically sold on the artwork, because people will see one just beautiful illustration or a great illustration that makes them laugh, whatever, and that's what draws them in. It's very hard with a picture book, especially because you're dealing with parents and grandparents and librarians and teachers. Without them seeing the story in full, they're not going to grasp everything. But a picture does, say 1,000 words. So I think Pinterest is a really good place for it. Obviously Twitter with images attached to it, and Facebook. But again, going back to my previous comments, just dropping stuff up online and expecting something to happen isn't really going to work. You still need to build a groundwork. You need to reach out to people. You need to kind of share the process, and so if you're just starting to market a book on the day it comes out, you've waited way too long. You want to be doing it a few months in advance and building up some community here. But think visually. Pick a really great illustration and start with that. But don't spam, and don't just drop it all over the place. Take some time beforehand to slowly build up a following. One thing that we've suggested to a lot of people, and I still think it's a great idea, is if you have some characters in the book, create Twitter accounts for them and have them start tweeting at each other and tweeting pictures from the book at each other, and even some of the dialogue, if there's dialogue or a story, and then try to get other people in on that. So that's I think a great way of getting things moving. So you want to start early, focus on imagery, and do everything you can to sort of immerse people into what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Pinterest is huge. I mean, especially with moms, they love Pinterest. They go on Pinterest to find ideas for everything. So that is a great idea.
Yeah, and Sherry, by the way, if Sherry's referring, I've been on that site before. They don't give submission guides about the Imagination Library. Yeah, I would say what you want to do is find those people's email addresses and email them directly. There's a list of the people who are on the committee.
Yes, and if all else fails, call the main number and say, how can I?
Yeah.
Do you have information for submitting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Evelyn just says that John and Laura, you two are the cat's meow tonight. As always, I come away with lots of information and re-energization.
Yay. Okay, I have one more question in the Q&A. Thank you, Evelyn. And then this last one that was sent earlier, and they kind of go together. So the first one is, being new to writing children's stories seems daunting. How does one organize and prioritize from the story to the marketing one's stories? And I don't want to be coy here, but
Blueprint.
Buy a blueprint. The whole blueprint concept is built around that question. We break every part of the process down step by step and lead you through it very succinctly, we give you worksheets each part of the way that you work on, and then you move to the next step and you take your work from that worksheet and you put it here and then you build on it, and we go through the writing process. We've got marketing stuff up there. We are going to have self-publishing coming out soon. So our whole goal with Blueprints is to take you through this process so it's not daunting, to break it into little bits for you. So that was the whole impetus, behind Blueprints.
And really, no matter what it is that you're learning in writing, whether we have a blueprint for it or not, the essence of it is this. If you are just picking up a golf club for the very first time, you shouldn't be thinking about how you're going to hit the ball 350 yards.
No.
And that's usually what stops people. Everything seems overwhelming because you kind of look out at this vast thing of everything you need to learn, and it's daunting, and say, well, do
Yes.
I really want to start this? So what you really have to do is live in the moment and live in the step. And that's why we created the blueprint, so that you are living, you literally cannot go through a blueprint and worry about what's coming down the road because you are immersed in that step.
Yes.
So the key thing is take it one step at a time. Don't worry, don't measure yourself against where you want to go. Measure yourself against where you've been. So if you spend, if you go through unit 1 of a blueprint and you know how to do something you didn't know how to do 2 hours ago, celebrate that. That's the way you learn how to do anything, but especially writing. So don't worry about learning everything right now. Don't worry about marketing your book. Don't worry about getting your book published. Worry about learning the craft one step at a time. So the blueprints do that, and we try to do that as much as we can with all the articles that we have in CBI, but just never allow yourself to get overwhelmed. Just live in the moment.
Right. And if you're just starting out as a writer, don't worry about the marketing. You're not there yet. So I give you permission to not even have to think about it right now. That's a ways off. And when you get to the point where you have to think about marketing, you'll be ready for it, because you'll have learned all of this other stuff that we're going to teach you along the way, so that you can step right into that spot. So let me get to this final question that came online, which kind of ties in with this. This is from a woman who basically said, she submitted manuscripts to a lot of agents, and she's gotten rejections, and several of the agents have suggested that she take online classes, attend conferences, etc. And she says, I don't have the money to do that. So she's saying, what do I do? Well, there comes a point in every writer's career where you have to decide if you're going to commit to learning how to become a successful author or not. And it's okay for writing to be a hobby. That's absolutely fine. And if that's the case, write for yourself because you love it. Write, and you can self-publish inexpensively online if you want. If you want to have some copies of your book to give to your family and friends, and if that brings you joy, that's great. But if you want to become a successful published author, and we have on our Blueprint site, we also have short programs that we call power tools, which are basically webinars that come with some worksheets. And one of them, Teresa Funk, who's doing our self-publishing blueprint, did a few months ago. It's called Shortcut to Success. And she talks about the 10 things all successful writers do, because she's a writer's coach. She's worked with many, many, many authors. And one of the things they all do is invest in their career. And we have a worksheet on how to figure out if there's something you need, like I need to attend a writing conference and it costs me $300 and I don't have $300. Okay, so let's think ahead 6 months. Can you put aside $50 every month? No? How about let's go back a year? Can you put aside $30 a month? That kind of thing. You just have to, at some point, do that if you're serious about becoming a writer. This is, at some point, this is a business as well as a craft. And in order to advance in any business, you have to invest in your business. And so there's a lot of great books at the library that teach writing. There's critique groups you can join. Those are all lower cost things that you can do. But at some point, if it's important enough for you to learn how to do this right, you will find a way to invest. And I understand that money can be very tight, but It's a matter of just saying this is going to happen and then finding a way to make it happen. And it might take a year to get there, but you can do it. So I think that gets into that mindset. I was talking about it in an earlier question about how do you deal with telling your family and friends you're a writer. If you take it seriously and you say, yeah, I'm saving up to go to a writing conference next fall, they're going to take it seriously too. So I don't know, John, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that pretty well sums it up.
Okay.
There's some very kind words here from Anne and Melanie and Brenda and Della.
Thank you.
Della is a new subscriber to CBI, and this is your second webinar. Thank you and welcome, Della.
Yay, welcome.
Love having you here. So thank you guys all for the kind words. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Rosie. And again, you know, if you want to pay it back, go ahead and just tell the world about CBI when you get a chance.
That'd be great.
Or about writing blueprints. That's always a great thing for us. So that's it from our, thank you, Renee. I think we're done. I think Laura's brain is probably scrambled. Right?
My tongue is dried out. I can't talk anymore.
Just access old parts of her brain for these.
You guys kept me on my toes tonight. Those were great questions.
Really, I love these questions too.
Yeah.
So the recording will be up tomorrow. And again, for those of you who have PictureBook Blueprint, you'll be able to, you'll find out about the Easy Reader add-on. Check your email for that. That should be coming in the next couple of days. And I think that's pretty much it. We will hopefully we will definitely be doing another one of these in March. Trying to work it around some travel things, but we will always be you know, shooting to do one of these once a month. And also just a quick reminder: spend some time in the CBI Clubhouse. You guys, you know, we have that giant library, the Children's Writing Knowledge Base. That's for you. We have tons of. If you go under member perks, you'll see we have free courses and social media course and lots of videos and webinars and all kinds of stuff. There's enough to keep you busy for months, and it's all yours as CBI members. So spend some time there. I think that's it.
And you know what? Just because I hate to leave anyone out, I see Francis asked a question that was before the last question I answered, so I want to answer that real quick.
Okay. Do I have to go through my closing spiel
No.
again?
Just all mentally put this before John's closing spiel. Okay. Francis, I'm not forgetting you here. I have a publisher who is interested in my manuscript. Yay, that's awesome. It is part of a series, but I have not yet had the chance to tell the publisher that. I do not have an agent, but wondering if I should get an agent before marketing my manuscript as a series. So the publisher is interested in your manuscript. I think you need to tell the publisher that you envision this as a series. They may not want to think of it as a series yet, but it's a good idea that the editor has that in the back of his or her mind. You know, should you stop and get an agent? It could take a while to get an agent. So if this is a publisher that you are dying to work with and you like this editor, you can certainly go ahead and negotiate directly with the editor on this first book, and then you can start looking for an agent to represent you on your later books. And the fact that you have one book published is going to be a selling point to an agent. So it kind of depends on if you love this publisher, or if this publisher is like, well, not my first choice of people to work for, then it's like, okay, it's great you had this much interest. Go ahead and start querying agents and see what happens with that. So you have to kind of weigh that, but definitely tell the editor that you envision this as a series. At least do that right now and see what they say. And they may decide that they don't even want to consider a series. And if you really want it to be a series, then you might want to withdraw the manuscript and look for an agent at that point. So I hope that helps. Okay. Thank you all for being here tonight. And we'll see you next time.
Good night, everybody.
Night.